What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my weekly recap, breakdown, review of the latest episode of FX, Y: The Last Man. Today we're breaking down episode 6, which was titled Weird Al is Dead, an episode in which we see our characters making some really tough decisions, and we're breaking it all down here in the spoiler review. But before we dive into it, make sure you're checking me out on all my other social media accounts. If you all are new to the channel, well, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. That way you can get the alert from when I drop new content. If you enjoyed this spoiler review, well, make sure to like and share the review. It helps out the channel a lot, but also appreciate the support. And in those comments, let me know how you all feel about this episode. It's called Weird Al is Dead, and I think this is a very weird episode and very kind of heavy-handed in its narrative, and we'll get into my thoughts in a little bit, but just let me know how you all felt about the 6th episode, your pros, your cons, of course, your thoughts and theories for the weeks ahead. But let's check in. Where are you at mentally with the show? I know we're past the halfway point. We're 6 episodes in. We got 4 left, but how are you all feeling 6 episodes in, and do you have promise? Do you have disappointment headed your way leading up to the finale? Just let me know where you all are at with the show so far. Let's talk about it in the comments. So before I recap it and break it all down, just to give you my thoughts on the episode, just briefly, I wasn't a fan. I think this is easily, in my opinion, the worst episode of the show so far, and I feel like it was extremely, and I know a lot of people have kind of checking out of this show just because they feel like it has an agenda, you know, it's pro women and all, and you know, they can have their feelings about that. But I will say, I feel like this episode, out of the previous 5, was the most heavy-handed in kind of touching on that narrative, which I assumed that was going to be the case at some point, that there were going to be a group of women that feel like, hey, the world's better without men. You know, the world's thriving without men. We don't need men. You know, all this stuff. I knew that was going to happen, but I just wish that, and this was the episode that it really happened, and I imagine we'll get more in the future, but I just wanted to be a little bit more balanced in that narrative and not to be so heavy-handed in the Republicans versus Democrats, feminists versus, you know, I just feel like this episode was just so focused on that narrative and really didn't flesh out anything else. And I don't feel like the characters have really grown from episode 1. So there's some issues I'm having with the show as a whole, but this episode really kind of reared its ugly head in regards to just narratively speaking. It was so forced in a lot of moments. I'll get into those moments here, but I just wasn't a fan of this episode. But that's just my thoughts. We'll get into it more in depth here, but let me know how you all felt about it, positively, negatively. Let's talk about it. But let's break it all down as we open up with the women that have been tasked to look for Yorick and look for 355 by President Brown, as at this point we see that Yorick, 355, and Allison have come across this group of women who seem to be very, you know, caring and kind of in tune with their, you know, positive emotions as they're not celebrating, but they're honoring the people that have died as they're singing. I love Radiohead, by the way, so I love that song, Karma Police. But they're singing the song, and we see Yorick and 355, they seem to, as the weeks have gone on, they've gotten closer. There's a little bit more connection there, just besides, you know, when they first met, it was just, you're the mission, I have to get you here. But now she's starting to open up more, and she's opening up at that moment, like, yeah, this was a good pit stop, but unfortunately that's cut pretty shortly because she notices that the women that have been sent to look for her have been close to finding them out. So she's just like, we should have never went here. We got to take them out, as she kind of talks about. He's like, are you going to kill them? And she says to him, I never kill people, which I guess that's just her mindset, right? That she doesn't see it as killing people is part of the mission, right? So we get that narrative there. And again, I thought that in this point they were going to finally be on the same page, but unfortunately this scene and then the scene that happened at the end, they couldn't be on the same page, right, based on everything that's happened so far. But let's get to, in this same scene, she finally lets the truth out, which I still don't know why 355 destroyed the phone to let President Brown know what she, like, I don't understand that narrative so far. And I thought at first, as I mentioned last week, she did that because she was going to maybe do her little side mission to find that Fran character, the leader of her underground secret operative corp thing. But I still don't know why she did that. Let me know where you all are at with that thought process of, let me, in communication, divert this mission to a certain extent and not let the president know. I don't know where her mindset's at, but she tells them that she knows the truth, and this is where Allison's kind of planting that bug into Yorick's head, like, hey, you can't trust her, which plays into the decision that he makes later on. But let's get into some of the things I really did enjoy about the episode, which are these characters here, which is Kim and Oliver. It's not in the show. I think the show is purposely, you're not supposed to like the characters, just, and regardless of how you feel about, you know, political, you know, sides of things, I think you're not supposed, they're supposed to be the quote unquote kind of, I don't want to say bad people, but they're meant to make conflict in the show, right? But as far as like my dislike of the characters, I don't like the actors playing the characters. I don't think they're really giving me a lot in their roles. But putting that aside, we see them slowly but surely, they're getting on the same page. They're obviously, both of them do not like President Brown. They want to get her out of the position of presidency. They talk about how she's using her loss as leverage with the other people and getting them on her side, and they're just, they're making up, they're diverting a plan of how to get her out of position, which will probably happen sooner rather than later. There's going to be a civil war, obviously, amongst those women in the politics side of the show. But going back to another character that this show has really went down that path in regards to anti-men with this Roxanne character, which I assumed that was going to be who she was in the show. She hate men. She's going to probably kill any man that she comes across, which is going to make what this episode did show is Hero and how she believes in Roxanne is going to be a big thing. And it's going to be obviously Yorick, Hero, who she's going to pick. That's what the show's leading to. At least that's what I think. But nonetheless, we see how she's kind of opening up about your past experiences with men. And we have some women sharing how they felt about men, how they've been abused by men. And this is where Nora's character and her daughter, Mackenzie, kind of get into the conversation. And Nora doesn't want her to be a part of this because she feels like she's too young. But Roxanne's like, nope, she's going to hear it. She's going to listen it. Tell us about your experiences with your uncle and your grandfather when you go to Thanksgiving, and how she mentions how they talk about how she's grown and this, that, and the other, how men look at women and stuff like that. And I get all that narrative, but it's just like, it wasn't balanced. And if I'm being honest, it just wasn't well written. It just wasn't like thrilling. It wasn't compelling. And it didn't have a lot of depth to it when they were having those conversations. It's just my personal opinion. I thought the writing was flat in those moments, which brings us into Nora really having this kind of heart-to-heart conversation after Roxanne doesn't allow these other group of women that are starving, that has a kid with them. She pushes them away. So it's showing you again that she's very selective. She mentions to Nora that she used to be a detective. She has good intuition. She takes off her shirt. She's lost her boobs. She's very anti-men. She says it so much in this particular scene where she's just like, we're thriving. We don't need men and all this stuff. We're seeing Nora, we're seeing Hero start to kind of feed into her narrative, kind of feed into like the world is a better place without men, which again, I knew the show was going to go that route, but I just felt like it was just so heavy-handed and it just wasn't woven into the narrative properly, in my opinion. It was just really kind of forced down the audience's throat, in my personal opinion, in this episode, especially by Roxanne in this episode. But let's go back into a really... Again, this episode was called Weird Al. It was a lot of like weird, like put together scenes, and this was one of them. As the women are bathing, all of them are comfortable around each other, obviously, but we cut to Hero and the women, again, they're kind of recruiting her into their little, cult, if you want to call it that, or to their group or whatnot, but they feel like she isn't being herself, and they're really kind of trying to get her involved more into this group. And again, I think that's what the angle of the show is going to be doing. Hero's going to end up being like a really pivotal person in this whole Roxanne group, and she's going to have to decide, do you want to stay with Roxanne or do you want to go back to your mom and Yorick? That's going to probably be how it plays out. But again, even in that scene, it was just weirdly put together. The performances by those other women, as again, they're fully nude at this point, which again, I know FX isn't, cable television, but I was very surprised by, okay, FX, you're really going MA, right? But I just felt like the scene just was, again, a flat scene in my opinion. Let me know how you all felt about it. It felt like emotionless. I don't know how Hero was able to feed into the stuff they were giving her. It was just kind of flat. But let me know your thoughts on it. But let's go back to how I feel like the show just continued to kind of drop the emotional ball in regards to 355 and Yorick, as we see them get into a fight of her not in the whole angle of like, I don't need men, the world doesn't need men, the world's a better place without men, and she's like, I'm fighting for you, this is an advantage for you, and you're questioning me. It's just like, it's forced drama, it's a forced narrative. It is it's not natural to the narrative that the show just continuously keeps putting in, especially in this episode. Men are terrible, they deserve to die, we're a better world without them. And it's just like, can we make the writing more compelling? Can we do a little bit better in that department? But moving on, we see that Kim offers to raise Christine's baby, which I don't know why this plot is even relevant to the main story. I don't know where they're going with that angle of that plot, and that's kind of like one of the least interesting things to me about this show. Then we transition into the show just continuing to get weirder and just really emotionless and just very flat as we have this funeral scene play out. We see the women are bathing this girl. She's throwing away her old name, her old past, her just being controlled by men. They put her in the bath. She's now coming, I can't remember, she named herself like an Amazonian type of name, or like a Greek type of name, and she's now a new woman, and they're now, they're bonding and all that stuff. And we see Sam's like, this is weird. And we see Hero is just like, she's so interested. And again, it's showing that Hero is starting to believe more into Roxanne's narrative and believe more into her beliefs and believe that these women are better off, you know, in the situation that they're in. And again, I see that's going to be a wedge in their relationship between Sam and Hero, which brings us back to Brown learning about the location of her son as well as 355. And while she's learning that, we see that Oliver's in the room, and we see President Brown trying to maneuver this situation, not give too much away about this secret mission that she had on the side. And again, we see that at this point, Allison and Yorick have left 355, which was a stupid decision. I do not care for this Allison character whatsoever, which we cut to the team that Brown has sent them out. She, you know, 355 takes them out pretty easily. And again, I'm just like, this is so boring. It's dark as hell. I can't even see anything that they're doing. I just thought that this episode was just so weird. It was just a really bad put together episode. But kind of wrapping things up, back to Oliver and Brown as she calls her a feminist. And you know, when Brown calls Kim crazy, she's like, oh, that's funny, you're calling a woman crazy and aren't you a feminist? It's just like, again, heavy-handed message here. But at least the gloves are off. At least they're done playing the BS game about being nice to each other. We know that they're at each other's throats now, and the whole thing is who's going to be the president by the end of the show. But again, wrapping this up, this episode again was just not my favorite. My least favorite of the show so far, and really kind of put a bad taste in my mouth with how they played everything out. But Hero finally reveals to Roxanne that she killed the guy that she had an affair with, and Roxanne again kind of playing to her narrative. You're okay. He deserved to die. He was a man, and you're in the perfect place. And again, giving her more reasons to stay and more reasons to buy into her belief. And we end with Nora watching the women beat up this one girl who was essentially flirting with Sam the whole episode, and she just watches and walks away, showing that she's even starting to believe more into this whole system that Roxanne has built up. So again, ladies and gentlemen, I've been championing this show up to this point, 5 episodes prior to this episode. You know, I'm thinking like, okay, the world building, the characters are getting somewhere, but I feel like the characters really haven't gotten anywhere. I feel like Yorick has been kind of pretty much forgotten about. He's pretty much the same character from episode 1. Don't care for Allison. 355 is still like the most interesting character to me, just like even her terrible decisions that she makes, or not even really understanding her logic of the decisions she makes. She's the most interesting character. I love Diane Lane, like I said, and I think that she, as President Brown, brings some dynamic to the show. But outside of that, everyone else is just like so uninteresting. That heavy-handedness in the narrative in regards to men being dead, and this is the best thing that's happened to the world, and just the Roxannes of the show, the Olivers of the show, the Kims of the show have really, I know what the purpose of those characters are. I just don't feel like the show has really given them the most that they could to make them compelling, complicated characters of a certain extent. They just feel like so stereotypical, in my opinion, and nothing nuanced in those characters, in my opinion. But hey, just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts. Again, your pros, your cons, your thoughts, your theories for what you all hope to see. I really hope this is the last of this type of narrative and we get better episodes moving forward for the rest of the season. But I was not a fan of this episode. But again, let me know your thoughts, and if you thought this was a good episode or a bad episode, and will you be back to watch more? Let's talk about it in the comments. Before you all leave, I appreciate you watching this review. Make sure to like the video, share the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell. That way you don't miss any of my other content, as you can see on the screen now. Subscribe to the channel, check out my other content. We'll see you in the next video.